A very good afternoon to you. It is the 10th day of August 2014. This is KTN Weekend at 1. We're coming to you live from the Nomad Palace Hotel in Garissa County. We're here all of last night and we'll still be here today as well. Welcome to the bulletin. We have the top stories for you as well as a discussion on matters identity. We'll be speaking to one young man who was with us last night and who today will tell us about his struggle to be Kenyan. All of that is coming up in this bulletin. But let's start off with the top stories and politics surrounding referendum. Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen says that the referendum push by governors and the opposition should wait until 2017. Murkomen says it would be cost-effective if the referendum was held alongside the general election. The senator has also warned governors in the ruling coalition against being used by the opposition to advance their agenda.
For the sake of the devolution and for our manifesto, we have said that matters of referendum should wait until 2017, where we have collated everything and we can be able to put it as a question and change it. And we have told governors, referendum is a political process. It is a process for consolidating political gains. In 2005, referendum iliza ODM. In 2010, referendum iliza URP. Tunauliza Governor Isaac Ruto, wewe unaingia referendum na Raila ndio izae coalition gani?
Let's stay with matters referendum. National Assembly Majority Leader Duale is warning governors from the ruling coalition against supporting calls for a referendum. He was speaking at a fundraising of Al Furqan Madrasa in Masalani sub-county right here in Garissa. Duale said Jubilee governors who are supporting a referendum called by CORD risk losing party sponsorship. He said all governors who are elected under the Jubilee coalition ticket have no choice but to toe the party line or else seek a fresh mandate from the electorate. He said reasons given by the CORD coalition and indeed the Governor's Council for the referendum are not strong enough.
Wewe governor wetu ukiitwa na Senate, wewe jaribu kukataa. Wewe jaribu kukataa. Utashika line ya Isaac Ruto. Utashika line ya William Kabogo. Utashika line ya huyo governor wa Kisumu na ule wa Murang'a. If you are a governor from the Jubilee coalition, kama wewe ni governor kutoka mirengo ya Jubilee, we are telling them you cannot join the referendum of the CORD coalition. Iko tu referendum ni moja na hiyo ni ile ya Raila. Kama wewe ni Jubilee na umesema unataka kufanya referendum, hiyo ni kusema wewe unataka kufanya referendum na Raila.
Right, from what is making headlines here in Garissa County, let's now take you to Bungoma. Now, quick action by the police in Bungoma town saved a medical practitioner from being lynched after a standard 7 pupil died at the health facility while procuring an abortion. Residents accused the doctor for being behind many cases of abortion in the town. They threatened to burn his health facility, but armed policemen arrived just in time. The body of the girl was taken to Bungoma Referral Hospital mortuary, while the doctor is being questioned by police.
Kuna venye madha alikuwa amekuja hapa kuleta mtoto wake abortion. Na mtoto mwenyewe ukiangalia umri wake ni udogo sana.
Ile ya kwanza ilitolewa mimba na county rep MCA. Akatoa mimba, mtoto akashitakiwa. Sasa huyu mama amekuja kulete, amekufa.
President Uhuru Kenyatta is preparing to return home following a tour of the United States, where he attended the U.S.-Africa Summit in Washington, D.C. The president left the United States and will visit Ethiopia before returning to the country. The summit focused on strengthening ties between the U.S. and also selling Kenya as an investment destination. Did the summit and the president's visit to the U.S. achieve its objectives? KTN's managing editor Joe Ageo sat down with the president for an interview, and he took the president to task over a number of issues. Here is an excerpt from that interview.
You've been here for the last couple of days, and what is that one thing that Kenyans listening back home can see? This is what our president came back with.
The critical thing is that I believe that this particular summit has managed to put Kenya and Africa on the U.S. map in a manner that has never happened before. So I think that first and foremost. And we have now American investors, we have American businessmen looking at Kenya and Africa as a whole from a different light.
Now, yesterday when you were speaking to the members of the diaspora, you spoke a lot about Somalia and said that we are not about to leave Somalia anytime soon. And a lot of people are thinking, isn't there a risk of us staying there endlessly, given the fact that Somalia is a very difficult place and the whole world has tried to pacify it for a long time?
I don't think so. And I think the message that we're sending is clear. It's not that we intend to be in Somalia forever. And I think what I said, so that we are very clear, is that we intend to be in Somalia until we are able to deal with this threat of Al-Shabaab. Yeah? And I think with each passing day, and one of the great things about going home is the understanding amongst many of our international partners, the United States, our neighbors, that all of us have to do a lot more to deal with this threat of insecurity caused by Al-Shabaab. And we need to all intensify our works to make sure we protect ourselves. And that is what I was telling our diaspora, that we should not succumb to pressure of a group that ultimately poses a threat even for our own stability and prosperity. We must work together to be able to deal with that, and we should not and cannot be intimidated by that group, because even if we were to leave, all we would be doing is creating space for them to commit more terror on our people. They had committed terror before the entry of Kenyan troops into Somalia. They have committed terror while we are there, albeit a lot more reduced, and they will continue if we pull out. So the only option we have is to join forces with the Somali people, who are the majority, well-meaning, to join forces with our neighbors and ourselves to uproot this small band of criminals who are intent on causing havoc and destruction and mayhem on the many millions who want just peace and stability.
The full interview of that runs later on this evening. That's at 9 p.m. on KTN Weekend Prime. Do make a date with us for that. Now, it is highly likely that whenever one is informed that he or she has contracted the HIV virus, a state of hopelessness and despair may follow. But for one woman, neither HIV nor being visually impaired could change her view of life. KTN's Timothy Otieno brings you a story of hope and a will to defy all odds, regardless of the circumstances.
At the Thika Primary School for the Visually Impaired, we find Catherine Mwayonga and her grandchildren singing to a melody she has taught them over the years. But if you look keenly, you'll find out that she is visually impaired. A sit-down with her reveals that she was born like any other normal child until she got run over by a bull at the age of 7, causing her to lose her sight.
I could see objects being far away. When I drew near to them, they are lost.
But Catherine's life would take a turn for the worst when in 2001, she suddenly fell ill. After numerous tests, she overheard doctors at the Kenyatta National Hospital declare her HIV status, but that would not dampen her spirit.
Kanambia, the most you can live is only 6 months. Nikasimama, I stood now up, and I hold myself 6. Kamwambia, just that. HIV, now I talked in English. Just that. Do you know when you are going to die yourself? Do you know I heard you saying my status early in the wards? You are unprofessional. I surely tell you I will leave. I will leave for my kids.
13 years after making that definitive statement, Catherine lives healthy and is currently a teacher and farmer in Thika town.
I said to her, after all, it's a disease, irreversible. I comforted myself.
Her grandson, Christopher, shows her the fully grown crops that she planted a while back. She has been able to start and sustain a poultry business that provides her with quail eggs she takes to improve her immunity to fight the deadly virus. The teacher, with a 36-year experience, has also started a self-help group for women living with disabilities where they sew these clothes and sell them to help them buy medication. Catherine, however, has one concern.
Drugs are never labeled. And therefore, I was taking drugs and even overdosing myself.
Grappling with diabetes as well as arthritis, Catherine says she will not back down from life, and her message to stigma instigators is simple.
To be friendly to the disabled. When they go for the visiting, please cancel us. Cancel these people.
For Catherine Moyonga, a grandmother of 12 living with HIV and AIDS and visual impairment, she says the stigma of society will not bring her down in her quest to better the lives of not only herself, but those of her children. Timothy Otieno, KTN.
Right. Now, all of yesterday we were here in Garissa, and we have been here throughout the weekend, and we're talking about the struggle for an identity, and a Kenyan identity at that, when we started off with Bottom Line yesterday. And I want to introduce you to a gentleman who we were with yesterday. His name is Jamal Beret. He's a law student and is also a resident of Garissa, born and bred. When we were talking yesterday, of course, we didn't get a chance to hear your story about that quest to be Kenyan, and it's all about that identity card, isn't it, Jamal? Tell us about your struggle to be Kenyan.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. My story is one among many. I remember in the year 2000, after I've cleared high school, I applied for an ID card, just like any Form 4 leaver will do. Initially, it was rejected. I got a rejection. I was told my papers were not quite in order. Mm-hmm. We tried to correct what they sought, which were just more proof to show we are Kenyans. Then after I applied, it took 2 years before I got the ID, which I finally got. But of course, then after you get an ID, that is another phase for any youth in this region.
Only half the struggle.
It's another phase which you cross with a sigh of relief, because most people will not get their IDs within 2 years. It will take up to 10 years. We've seen the story of the old man. 50 years later, he didn't have. Then in the year 2006, by this time, the year 2005, I was working for the government.
Right.
I was working at Ministry of Planning, Central Bureau of Statistics, in a project. I lost my ID. But remember, I was already a government officer.
Yes.
After I lost my ID, I reapplied for a replacement.
Yes.
Then there was no response this time. So I had to travel to Nairobi to the offices at the Registrar of Persons and ask what's going on. I thought this will take a bit. Then they told me they are unable to know how I got the initial ID. So of course this was a discussion that took many days, asking me to keep coming back for another officer to see me and another one to see me, explaining myself over and over again to them. Later on they came clean and told me that they have established that I'm not a Kenyan, that the papers that I've used to apply for the ID were not mine, that they only had no option but to take back.
So in essence, your ID had been revoked?
So they told me clearly that the ID was now revoked. So I was no longer a citizen. But of course, that took me aback with a lot of shock and anger. But then I realized that this administrative officer of government really was misusing the power that he had. indeed, he could be having the power to verify documentation of anyone who applies for the ID, but to revoke an existing ID without any, there was no proof to show that I was not a citizen. So later on, what I did was I said the best thing for me to do is to have a trail of my struggles with them. So what I did was whenever I came to visit the office, I would leave a paper or a letter or a follow-up to show that I was here last on such a date, and I'm here again.
So you
following
documented
up.
your process.
I documented my process through email to the Registrar of Persons himself. At one time, they called the CID officers and NSIS, as they were then called. So they asked me a lot of questions. What I could not understand was why, because I don't think it's ordinary for them to go that late. But I realized they were basically trying to intimidate me, because the process of acquiring an ID card is one that involves, among many other things, of course, the documentation, but you have to part with something.
So throughout this process, and you did mention when we were speaking earlier that your father was a civil servant.
Yes.
So for him to have been a civil servant, you would obviously have to have been
interestingly, one, I was born in a hospital. I was lucky to have been born in a district general hospital.
Right.
And remember, when you are born in a hospital, there's a documentation.
The notification.
There's the birth notification, which I had a copy. Where I accessed. And my father, who had also by this time served in the civil service for over 25 years. But they didn't want to see this side of the story, because they said the possibility was that he is not even my father, I'm faking the whole thing.
So Jamal, tell us how then you finally got your ID back after this revocation process, and you trying to document the process of you getting it back and being questioned as to your identity.
Yes, so what I did was that I went to all the offices, to the top. I think by then there was a lady at Registrar of Persons, and I threatened that I'm going to go to court. I told her that I have all the documentation to show that I'm a Kenyan, that my parents are Kenyans, that I was born, irrespective of whether your parent is a Kenyan or not. By the mere fact that you're born here, that automatically will have qualified anyone to be a Kenyan. So when I threatened that I'm going to court, is when, after I left the place, 2 days later, I got a call from them. They told me that I could come for my ID.
Yes.
This was in 2008.
Yes.
So finally, I managed to get my ID, which has, up to now, has a date of issue of 2008.
So a very long journey for you, 8 years to finally get the identity. Yours is a story of many here, which means there's a general, sense of despondency. And what for you is the way forward in terms of, just inclusivity? Because you would imagine that a lot of young people in this part of the country will be quite bitter with the government. What's the way forward?
Most definitely. Yeah, you realize that many people will not have taken it up with the government the way I did.
Yes.
Because one, you need to travel to Nairobi. How many people will access Nairobi? For you to access Nairobi, you pass through 8 roadblocks where you must have produced the ID, which you don't have.
So how do we go from here, Jamal?
I think the best thing is, one, the time for lamenting and crying is over. We need to stand up as people who are rightfully here. More importantly, now the youth, who by the year 2030 will be 75% of this country.
Right.
We do not need to be told on how things are to be done. We need to provide the way forward to the government by, one, electing the right leadership, and secondly, we take it up with the administrative bureaucracies that when they misuse power, discretional power, many think that the officer can decide to give or not to give. What we need to know is that the officer has a mandate with limits within the law. So long as the officer is not clearly explaining to you why he's not giving you, and by then we need to ask, whenever they reject, we need to demand the rejection in writing, so that we can take it up with the courts.
Document the process just the way you did, and though it was a long struggle, you finally got that. All right, thank you very much for letting us know just what young people go through in this country in the quest to have that identity, to be Kenyan. And this is what we're talking about right here in Garissa County. And we're talking about that quest, that all-important quest to just be Kenyan. And of course, that informs a lot of the perceptions that we have in this area and indeed in many others. The discussion will continue a little later on this evening on Checkpoint. We'll have a special edition of Checkpoint coming to you live from Garissa. We will tackle Jamal's issue among many others and seek to find solutions. One of them is perhaps to document the process, and he did it within the confines of the law. So nothing about, seeking an anarchy situation in the country. Thank you for staying with us on KTN Weekend at 1. Let's give you some regional news now. The Democratic Republic of Congo is taking pride in recent steps to prevent illegal logging in its vast equatorial forests. But experts argue that these measures are far from enough to stop a thriving business. In the Congo River port of the capital, Kinshasa, which serves the Atlantic routes, Environment Ministry agents have since last year delivered hundreds of certificates of traceability, spelling out the origin and transport details of logs. The precious documents have opened the way for legal exports of valuable hardwoods, mainly to the European Union and to China, while regular buyers and suppliers say that in the past year, it has become much more difficult to trade in uncertified lumber. Timber monitors operate throughout the port, but two British non-governmental organizations behind recent surveys hold that this wood is only a small part of what is cut every day, mostly by artisanal loggers. Let's have some sports news for you now. Media Combined are the winners of the inaugural Kentucky Fried Chicken Media Five-a-Side Football Tournament that was held at the Kenya Harlequins grounds in Nairobi. Media Combined lifted the trophy after edging Media Select 2-0 on post-match penalties. Kenya sports journalists won the third-place playoff after edging Bloggers FC 1-0. 10 teams took part in the event, which was overseen by the Kenya Premier League players Wycliffe Kasaya of AFC Leopards, Paul Kiongera of KCB and Brian Osumba of Tusker. The event was used to officially launch a national children's five-a-side football tournament to be played on September the 13th at the same venue. The children's tournament, dubbed KFC Football Beat, was open to school-going children, both boys and girls, aged between 10 and 14.
Presenting the winning trophy, the general manager of KFC, Gavin Bell.
That's all we had for you on this special edition of KTN Weekend at 1. We are live in Garissa County. KTN Bottom Line is what brought us here, getting to the bottom line of searching for that all-elusive Kenyan identity. The news carries on KTN, so do stand by for that. At 6:30 p.m. we will have a special discussion from here, as well as at 9 p.m. So that's what you need to look out for. We'll have a special edition of Checkpoint. Also to look out for in our 9 p.m. bulletin, that interview with KTN's managing editor Joe Ageo and the President Uhuru Kenyatta. Do stand by for that later on. Have a good afternoon. We'll see you later. My name is Yvonne Okwara.